lot of people believe in this concept of like, well, 100 million people can't be wrong. Actually,
they almost always
the
are.
terrifying reality is billions of people can be wrong, actually, about the same thing, it turns out. And so if you actually have this weird assumption, and that is, what that assumption is if you trace that psychologically back to where it comes from, it's just the animal brain. Because animals are pack things. And it behooved us to survive to immediately instinctively go, well, if I know I don't know a lot, but of this group of humans, this guy certainly knows what he's doing, then I'll follow suit. And then if enough of us are following suit with this guy and it just kind of works, why are we going to question that? Like, it works. So, like, that's what worked, and it needed to help humans survive. That's not to say that there wasn't a time and place for that, but it's like, if you're not an animal anymore because you evolved, now you have this prefrontal cortex that makes decisions, and you're a human, well, now your morality is different. You're not an animal. It's time to stop acting like that. And so you have to think and go, what do actual individual humans, each in their brains, think? And is there even such a thing as like, oh, there's a certain number of them that once they all think that thing, I can turn off my brain and assume, well, now 5 of those guys agree. That thing must be true.
Yeah. Well,
and like, that's not how that actually works, because we evolved to be these very complex, divine level things that have a consciousness that decide and then go back and go, I shouldn't have made that decision. And because we can do that, we're not just bored or we're not happy. So it doesn't work like that.
So because of that, real quick, like, they've played that situation in other movies like World War Z with Brad Pitt on, you know, how they, you know, do all of the stuff that they do. And they pretty much like have everybody in this, you know, chaotic state, and they don't have control over anything. And whatever they try and do, it doesn't work, you know. And in the end, they still have all these, you know, individuals that they do manage to work together. But it's not really like fixing, you know, the bigger, you know, picture on that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And like Mr. Smith explains to Mr. Jones in the movie, like the same thing, that the weird complexity of the human brain that enables it to be, you know, sort of figure things out, be rebellious and stuff, can be used to program it and control it. Because there's a whole lot of propaganda and stuff that wouldn't really work on a cow.
Because they don't think with a prefrontal cortex.
And again, in the novel, he has more time to explain this thing. Like, you can't explain to an ox, you're going to plow this whole field today or I'm going to kill you. It's like, nope, you got to follow it and whip it the whole way, because all it knows is, ow, I guess I'll keep going. Ow, I guess I'll keep going. A person can have the concept of, you're going to do this all day or you're going to die. Bye. And then the exploiter doesn't need to be there. In fact, he doesn't even need to whip him. He just has to have the idea of that possibility.
And the main thing is that control freaks who really like controlling people, one of the things that they figured out when they're like, well, I enjoy controlling, I figure out how to best control people is, I just need individuals to believe something enough that they teach it to their children.
Yeah.
And that's a self-generating economy. And I die and the world goes on as it is.
Exactly. It keeps it.
That needs to be.
It keeps the
restated. Could you say that one?
Yeah.
Really profound.
Yeah. So, if a group of control freaks really wants their control to take off, they need to make sure that the initial group of people that they're trying to brainwash or influence with their information believes what they are learning so much they just automatically teach it to their kids.
So they're indoctrinated. That actually shows up a lot more in the book too. Because Smith explains, eventually you don't have to teach them this. They will teach themselves it over and over again. You just have to remind them every once in a while.
It becomes Smith.
Well, you know what that throws me back to is, if you guys know the origin of the education system here in the United States, it actually came from Prussia. And what happened is the Prussians took over Poland, and they knew they could not get the adults to go along with the dictatorship regime that was going on, so they decided to create the education system to indoctrinate the youth. And I actually saw like a lot of throwbacks, you know, and a lot of homages to that movie. And actually, one thing I wanted to talk to you about that we were just bringing up is, you brought up the great concept of how they don't have to crack the whip. They'll have other people police for you. Exactly what you brought up in the movie when they made 2 of the groups of slaves the security members that help police the rules. What kind of spawned that idea? I'm very interested in that.
Well, that's like, it's important for people to understand that the tyrants are not going to oppress us themselves. They're not that strong, and they're not that stupid either. Like, they trick other people into doing it for them. So you have Jimmy Jack, the white guy, who at one point even says, "I'm just doing my job."
So basically, the art of control is a business, and they're the CEOs.
Exactly.
Right, and they're not dumb enough to enforce it themselves, but to give power to some of the fellow slaves or workers and have them be the enforcers, that's the reality of it. You're not going to find the politician on the battlefield. You're going to find the pawns that he tricked into thinking it's noble and righteous to go kill somebody you don't know because we told you to. That's who's going to be on the battlefield. So they're smart enough to train their underlings to train their underlings, and to control their underlings so that they control the other underlings. And so it's this pyramid where the guy at the top eventually doesn't have to do anything. And again, in the novel, Smith takes more time to, when he's about ready to leave, he explains to Jones, like, we've gotten it so, you'll have to do a thing here and there, but they're doing it to themselves now. They're passing on these ideas to each other, to their children. And they're enforcing it on each other so that we don't even have to do that. Like, if somebody gets up and says, "Hey, this is wrong," the other victims are going to get mad at him.
And then evil can go from being conscious and malicious, where control freaks are sort of psychopaths and they know exactly what they're doing and they're aware of their behaviors, to, it's passed on to the ignorant and the stupid and the well-meaning. And they're stupid just in that they have a lack of knowledge and they don't know how to think well enough to understand they're a part of a bigger system. And so Larken and I were talking about this, how we actually think, and this goes back to why, we're not really frightened about anything happening, is because all of the signs are that the intelligent, malicious control that was at the helm of the wheel is dying. And it's either dead, it's died off, or they're dying off. And you have the wheel is still spinning, and that's what's so creepy. But it's spinning mostly on stupidity and delusion. And so you have the machine running itself because the layers, they built this on a model of, we're going to have basically all of the rungs under us be layers of considerably more ignorant on what's really going on and dumber than us, so that the bottom rungs are absolutely, completely, ridiculously stupid and have no clue. The middle rung has some but barely any clue, and then anybody who was close to us, like, if we die, they still aren't going to know what the F we were doing because they're nowhere near our level, and they weren't even malicious. They're just the ones that want the most power by default. But they're not the level of, I know exactly how evil I am, I know what I'm doing, I don't care, I'm unapologetic, I have no emotions, and I'm going to do it anyway. And those psychopaths are actually fewer and farther in between in the world because they come from those old Rockefeller Rothschild generation. Like, they aren't as many in the world, actually.
Yeah, and that's why we represented it in the movie that way. There's one Mr. Smith, and there's a Mr. Jones and a Mr. Johnson, and half the time they don't really understand what's going on either. They have their power, they're benefiting from it, and they're like, what? Why did we get... And again, there's even more of that in the novel because there's more room fit in. Yeah. And half the time he's like, why did we do that? Like, they'll go follow his orders, and then he has to explain to him, here's the manipulation, here's why this works, and here's why they do it. Oh, okay. Because that's what, like, almost everybody you see on TV in the political circus, they're nowhere near the top. They're idiot puppets who don't really understand the whole game, but they're playing their part and they're getting their reward of fame and money and some level of control. But we had to depict that in the movie, that this is a hierarchy, and Smith owns everybody, including Jones and Johnson. Like, everybody is beneath him.
Well, speaking of characters, like, and like people just not really acting or doing anything, and they're just standing on the sideline. I remember, you're saying this. I remember in the movie, Mrs. Jones and Madam, she's like, she at first is like real gung-ho and, this and that, and I want to go and, sell and do this. But then, at the, towards the end, she's clenching her hands on the curtain and watching these people do this to each other, their own people. Yep. And like, you could tell that she really doesn't approve of it, but she can't do anything about it besides just observe and watch and experience it, because it's at that point out of her hands, because even though she had the authority, and she still does, because she is still a slave owner, she doesn't speak up, she doesn't say anything when she knows that the system is broke to begin with.
She's run by fear.
And
see she's run by
yes.
fear. And he just admits to it. I
Fear
don't
of getting
care.
raped by Mr. Smith.
Is there more of like
Seriously,
her
yeah.
character like in your creation? I mean, I didn't get to ask you about like what's your mental state on creating all these characters, because I mean, as a artist and a writer, you create it, you bring that to life in your words, and I know that during the filming you had to cut a lot of that.
Yeah.
Right.
And you know that also cuts on, you know, the development of each character and how they are. But you know, I want to know what your mental state is when you were creating all these characters.
Well, everybody represents like various sort of stereotypes in the real world to one way or another, but then has enough distinct stuff about them to be a character, so they're not just sort of a cookie cutout thing. The Mrs. Jones character doesn't do a whole lot more in the movie, but Mr. Smith does talk about her too. About he's talking to Mr. Johnson in the book about like why is she still with Mr. Jones? Why is she going along with it? And he talks about how she can imagine that like she's being the dutiful wife, so she's good, even though he's this creepy predatory psycho, because he's worse in the novel. But Smith, and one of the funnest things, my first book was called How to Be a Successful Tyrant. I have to get the second edition in print because it's out of print now. But it goes through the mentality, and to me, it's really fun writing that side of it, of like the expression of the evil mentality of psychopaths, of how they do it, because it's pretty clever. It's utterly evil and should be wiped from the face of the earth. But it's kind of clever. It's like, well, I can be impressed by your chess game, even though you're an evil psycho and somebody throws you into a chipper. But getting more into the mentality of Mr. Smith in the book, and when he's talking to the other people, he understands the whole game. And everybody beneath him, including Mr. Jones and Mr. Johnson and Mrs. Jones, they're all just pawns in his game, and he knows it. And he's manipulating them all, and like the thing of when let's see if I can describe it so people who have seen the movie know what I mean. But Mr. Jones walks into a closet to grab a thing. Mr. Smith says, "What are you doing?" Because Mr. Jones doesn't even know what's going on. And then he finds out, oh, so you're lying to me too. You're playing your games on me too.
He's like, yeah, let's go out there. And he's like,
no spoilers.
The imaginary monster, right? With the pulling out the gun.
It's about imaginary monsters. And so even in that case, it's about Smith's control over everybody, including the people in power who aren't really entirely in power.
And that's Jones and Jones.
And so that's a real depiction of how the political system works. The politicians aren't the top of this. They're all these clueless puppets. They're basically, they're good at BS. They're good at pretending to be something and putting on a show.
Well,
they're getting worse at that too. But they don't understand the propaganda. They don't understand the whole game. They're still playthings of people who have way more power than them. Most people have never heard the names of those people because they're smart enough to stay out of the spotlight. Exactly. But the whole, and this is the thing I asked to be able to speak to the cast on the last day of shooting, because we shot that last scene on the last day. We didn't do the whole thing chronologically, but that last scene was on the last day. And I asked to be able to talk to the cast because I said, I have to make this not a spoiler too. Most movies are like feel-good things, and I realize why part of this isn't going to be that comfortable, because a lot of what this movie depicts is the failing of humanity. Not just the all full-fledged sociopaths, not just the beneficiaries of evil like Jones and Johnson, who are just, well, this is how it's done, and Jimmy Jack is like, well, I get paid and I just do my job. But the well-intentioned people who are victims of it, who either turn a blind eye or they end up being cheerleaders for evil unwittingly. And so every little character was sort of a piece of humanity and demonstrating how most of humanity fails over and over and over again to do the right thing. And there's really only one good guy in the whole thing, which is Samuel. I can say that without it being a spoiler.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
I cried during his speech.
Yeah. And there are other people who sort of come close, but then they back off, or they don't quite dare to do something, and they don't dare to stand up with him. And so it's one example of here's what we should be, and here's what usually happens to the people who do what they should do, and here's all the other ways you could fail as a human being. And I actually want a bunch of people who watch it to relate to different characters and go, would I have done any better? Probably not. Because for most people, the answer is probably not.
Because
You
most
would have
people
done
are,
it.
when they like to think back and be like, oh, I'm the rebel type. In any time, in any place, I think I would have been that rebel. I'm like, you are projecting the you now, with the access to information you have now, in the world you're in now, onto the past, in a world where there is no television channels, there is no internet, there is no outside information other than what is pounded into your head by the 5 or 6 people you know and your tiny little village that you've never left. What's the likelihood that you're the guy that broke out of all of that without any freaking help? And so people that think they're gonna be that guy, I'm like, you're forgetting one thing. You're forgetting the internet. You're in the modern world, and you probably used a little bit of that internet, or you used access to information, which is my main phrase, access to information, to break free of that. And like, control freaks really only had the traction they did for thousands of years due to control of information. And that's why people go, they look at history and they tend to go, well, it's looking like it's been repeating itself for so long. Yes, because we didn't have the internet. Well, why is history not repeating itself now? Because we have the internet. Because when a bunch of individuals all across the globe have a little fondle slab in their hand,
Fondle slap, I love it.
and they can
Friends of
just
ours came up with it.
they can just be like, oh, some bullshit's going down with authority. And they're all aiming their cameras at it, and then they're like, upload live to the internet. And like, everyone's like, wow, people are being assholes to each other. This is not okay. This is what's going on over there in another country. Hey, my tax dollars are being used to do that to that guy. Like, and that's the reason that we're not going to repeat history. And that's actually a huge focus that I want to get out to the rest of the community, because I don't think the main problem with a lot of where things are at right now is the fact that there's actual real authoritarian control still stopping people. It's right now not enough people know how free they really are if they push at the edges of the boundaries right now. They aren't realizing that part of what's been happening is they moved into the phase of, we are losing control, we've been losing control, now we're trying to gaslight you to make you feel like you don't have the power you do, because we're so afraid that you all are 2 seconds from figuring out how many of you there really are. And that's what I've been trying.
Talks about that.
Yep, and that is addressed in
Why
the
did
movie.
they go along
And
with it?
the people who have like paid attention to numbers, their brains are paying attention to numbers. They're like me. They like math. We are all excited. Anyone I know who likes math, it's funny. Every time I find someone who's excited about the future, I'm like, "Are you also into math?" They're like, "Yes." Let me explain why statistics are on our side. And like they'll go into like some explanation of how the data shows that we're winning and we can win and we're gonna win. But you have to look at that, because they really are doing the abuser thing. When control freaks lose power, they project themselves bigger than they are. They go, try to seem as big as I am. Like, I'm this tiny little old guy faggot over here in my rich house, and oh my god, they're coming for me, and I'm a pedophile, and I know it. Okay, well, use all my money and power to make sure I can obscure myself, run off into the woods and hide, run to my underground bunkers, and really just get all of my paid little playthings and minions, yellow minions, to go and do the thing and like tell everyone that we're still super powerful and make a big stink like we still have some authoritarian like robustness here. And then all of us pushing back are like walking up to a cardboard cutout going dink, and like the whole government goes. So it's like, it's not really here the way you guys think. It's just trying to look like it is, because it's those control freaks they're dwindling, and they feel their numbers dwindling, and they're like,
the final thing that has to happen is people understanding what real tyranny looks like, because like everybody can look like I'm going to be perfectly happy if a bunch of people watching this thinking, oh, this is going to be a movie telling us how bad slavery was. Like, does anybody not know that slavery is really bad?
Right. At this point, it's like the obvious chattel slavery.
What it's really telling you is not how bad slavery was, it's that it didn't leave, and that you're still cheering for it. And so when people do the virtue signal thing of, oh, I think it's horrible that slavery was, I'm going to go on and on about it. Okay, is anybody arguing against you? No. Does that take any courage? I mean, you're right. It was about the most evil institution you can imagine. But whoop-de-doo, what courage and anything of virtue does it take to bash it now, when literally everyone else around you is saying, that was horribly evil? Okay, we all recognize that. Duh. Yeah. Do you recognize when the same thing is repackaged and called something else, and the slaves are a little bit more comfortable and stuff, and we're going to do things a little bit... Or
We have
are
some
you
nice
on,
things that's
yeah,
what happened.
or are you on the wrong side? As long as they reframe it a little bit for you, and that's what I want people to watch it. Like if people go in going, yeah, slavery is really bad, and watch it and go, oh crap, like
Unless they sell it to me in this package, in which case I actually like slavery.
and hate the people who condemn it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, pretty much.
Yep. Larkin does a lot of that, you'll find.
It's like one of the
the
things-
bait and switch thing.
One of the things that I saw in the movie that I'm just curious about this, because you guys, from what we heard at the Q&A last night, you did a lot of unintentional homages towards things. It just so
Yeah, there
happened
were
to
some
end
of
up
them.
that way. So getting down on the Matrix, like you were saying, Miss Amanda, was Smith, was that homage there? Was that intentional at all, or was that just by accident?
No, that was. I called him Mr. Smith and Mr. Jones intentionally as generic names in the original animated version. It was like 10 minutes long. It was 12 years ago.
Yeah.
There was, and that's what it was based on. It was Andrew's idea to the director to make it into a movie, but that was intentionally a completely generic name so that it wouldn't be about a particular individual. But then, so I named it Smith, and it conveniently occurred to me when writing the original script, and then there's brief mention of it in the movie, and more in the novel, of how convenient it is because Smith explains to Mr. Jones, yeah, you know, an ironsmith and stuff, they mold that. I'm a slavesmith. I mold slaves into the most useful tools for their owners. That was just accidental because I just called him Smith before, having nothing to do with the Matrix or nothing to do with the name, and I'm like, well, that's handy that I thought of that doing the script of like, this works perfectly, so throw it in there.
I think that connection is still going to be in our favor because just when it comes to first of all, search engine optimization, keywords. Anyone typing in Mr. Smith and you get like both Maurice Johnson as Mr. Smith and you get the old shots of Agent Smith in the Matrix movies, and it's like, woo!
What is this, Smith?
There's not a correlation here.
There's not too much difference.
Right?
Just a little bit of a progression.
Still there.
So it just worked out in our favor that some of those things were happy accidents.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, it could have been like Matrix came out a long time ago. For all you know, maybe your subconscious indirectly influenced you to name Mr. Smith in the original animated Jones Plantation on YouTube.
Yeah,
Some
I'll
part
pretend
of your name was like, well,
subconsciously
Anderson Smith, and your brain's like, we're pulling this from like the Matrix.
I'll claim
That's where that's
unjustified credit for that.
But you're like, I was not consciously doing that. No.
Or do you think that maybe it comes from a main source because at that time, you know, you were experiencing stuff in your personal life, you know, going through your legal stuff.
Yeah,
I mean,
that was even
would
way
you
before
consider
that.
it just being like an awakening of everything, and then maybe just having that moment to tap into source, and source being like, hey,
Here, put
this
in here.
this goes here? Because as an artist, I find when I create, sometimes I'm not all consciously there. I go into a zone, and to me, I feel like that's when, you know, source is hitting me and hitting that creativity.
Yeah.
And so,
It's like instead of flow where you're hyper focused, you're channeling.
yes.
And I can create. I know because I've created music both ways. I've consciously chosen the lyrics, and then I've channeled the lyrics, which is just my version of saying I've listened for them from the
Hear
universe.
them somewhere and write
And
them
I can
down.
do both, but they're literally different modes. So I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like when you're in sort of like, I'm trying to listen for what this is supposed to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
And
it's
I-
coming from maybe somewhere that's not
Yeah.
you.
That's
had
why
this-
I asked what you were experiencing when you were creating all these characters, because where were you mentally? You know, what was your state of mind? Were you open to the universe at that time? Were you
Yeah, by
dealing with your
then-
own emotions, fighting through that battle,
by
through the
then
paper?
It was summing up a bunch of things I had already thought about for, you know, had gone through years and years earlier. Because hardly any of those characters show up in the little animated version. It's like, there's Jones and Johnson and Smith and Samuel. I think those are the only ones that have names in the animated because it's so simple.
Right.
But I have noticed in writing much of stuff, like in the Iron Web, where I'll write something and it'll feel like, well, I'm just going to decide this happens, and later I go, wait, that works perfectly. Well, I'll pretend that was on purpose because that perfectly sets up a thing that just occurred to me to do.
But you know that
So,
mode
yeah.
she's talking about, where you're intentionally sort of
Yeah.
listening for stuff. Did you have to
And
go
it
into
just-
that mode with the new elements of like, how is this going to
It
work in
was-
this movie? Because this isn't in the story.
Yeah,
I need
not-
to know how it's going to work.
Not so much with Jones Plantation, because it was so much a rehashing and recompilation of things that I've talked about and written about 8,000 times before.
Okay.
And so it was sort of, how do we pack as much of this into this one story as we possibly can? But a lot of it already came from things I had talked about before and explained before and gone through before and all that. So this was sort of an opportunity to sort of have so you can smash it into a magnum opus jam, like everything I've said in the last 27 years, into an hour and a half. And
So
it
it's very
doesn't all
conscious.
fit,
It's
but
very conscious creativity at that point then. So
yeah,
kind of more
and I actually, like, when I was doing the script, I ran through, like, I looked through How to Be a Successful Tyrant. It's like, all right, is there anything in here I want to sneak in there? And, like, are there any points that I'm going to write it and go, oh, I didn't point out that they also do this? And so, and that's why the first rough draft was like 3 hours long. If we had made it into a movie, it's like, that's cool, and I make it way shorter. Because there's just...
That's every writer's nightmare, by the way, guys.
It would have been
it's really stressful for a writer that really, it's hard to see past what you really believe should be in your movie.
Yeah.
And try to figure out how to, and then if you're Larken, you know, to try to figure out, like, I already say things as succinctly as possible. You want me to say this more succinctly?
So Andrew will be like, see these 3 pages? Make it 2 sentences. And I'm like, ah, man!
I do that, yeah, it's
But it needed to be done.
It's stressful, but it was like the most worthy, stressful work you've ever done. Where I feel like it was really, like, I think it's gonna stand to show itself as that.
Yeah.
Like, I think that the way I think it will take off, and I think it will end up being like sort of like that movie will be like a beginning of like one of your own magnum opus.
Yeah, but it's so, like, I'm usually a total control freak. Like, with my music and writing, and I can just sit there and write a book and nobody's telling me what I have to do. And then you're on set, and there's 80 gazillion people working together, and, like, almost all of them doing things I don't know how to do. So I'm not even in charge, I'm not even the director. So it's like trying to do this juggling act of, like, okay, here's what I wanted to say originally. Andrew pictured it differently, and it came out way better because of it. And then the actors are doing their things, and I'm, you know, the juggling act of having to do that. And you can't just go, well, I'll think about that for a couple days. It's like, all the actors leave in 2 days. I'll think about it for 7 minutes.
And it's funny to watch, like, two men who are very, very much their individual own person. It's like, you know how there's, like, the type where they say, like, this person's good at being, like, working well with others. This person does not work well with others. And it's because, like, it's not because they don't work well. It's because they're like, I am the type of person that wants to do my art my way, and I'm not very bendy on that. And like, Andrew
sought you out. How did he find you?
Yeah, we met down in, it's funny because we both live in Phoenix and we didn't know that. We met in Mexico at Anarchapulco, and he was interviewing me for a different thing. And in that back and forth and talking about stuff, he actually mentioned the thing of, like, slavery being, like, modern slavery being mind control. And I said, well, I did a little animated thing about that called Jones Plantation. Later he watched it, and then he's the one who first thought of making it into a short, and then realizing this isn't going to fit their short. And then approached me to make it a movie. And the thing is, I knew he was all the way on board with the message, and that's the thing that mattered. And there's so much about it that is awesome, that is completely because of him, that I wouldn't have done, or what I would have thought of. I'm not a director. And so there was a part of it that's sort of difficult to, like, I'm going to hand him the reins. This isn't an equal partnership. He's the director. Yeah. I'm not. And I'm the writer. And
but I mean,
I still have input. And we had a zillion meetings about the script along the way. So it's not like he's like, thanks, get out. But at the end of the day, I know that he's in charge. And so I had to put a bunch of trust in him. And I'm really glad I did, because he made something way better than I would have made if I tried to direct it myself.
But that was really cool to see. Like, that's what I mean, is watching, like, the people that other people are like, oh, those two dudes can't work together or get along. They're going to punch each other out halfway through because they're too bullheaded on how they want things. And I watched Andrew sometimes be very, like, Andrew about the way something was, and you being very Larken, and I'm like, how's this going to go down?
No, we're going to
do
it this way.
You guys would always work it out, but it was entertaining to watch just because you guys are all the way that, like, quintessential, like, I am an anarchist, I am an individualist, I have my way I do things, and if I think something is supposed to be a certain way, I really strongly think that, and you're gonna know it. I need to get this across. So just watching them start to they're trying to, they're not being violent, but they're also getting you're getting those vibes. Like,
I only yelled at him once on set.
Yeah, you only yelled
And
at
the
him
funny
once.
thing is, it was about something that he totally should have done, and so it wasn't. This is the usefulness of voluntary hierarchies. When I decided you're the director, it means if we disagree, if I can't talk you into it, you win. And you can't make a movie with 7 directors with different ideas. It doesn't work at all. So it was. So some of it was working it out till we agreed, and some of it was just, well, he gets his way because he's the director. And the funny thing is, on every example I can think of where it was that at the time, I was like, oh, I hate that. And he's like, well, we're doing it this way. It was better. It ended up better because he was in charge, because he's the director and I'm not. So, but that was, that was fun that it was so much better because I didn't have an equal say in making the movie. Because I knew he was true to the message and the story we were trying to tell. That's the thing that mattered. If somebody came along and started corrupting that, I'd go, screw yourself.
Well, it shows like a movie that wasn't made by an egomaniac. It shows you can see.
Yeah.
Well, and there's a certain amount of, I think, humility and creativity that's important, and it's also lost in today's world because then people can't enjoy each other and make cool stuff because they're literally unwilling to see for a second that their art or whatever they have could be tweaked a little to be made so much more effective, so they won't let anyone in, so they won't work with anyone. And I think it's something cool to see that you didn't confuse being an individualist anarchist to mean well, because authority and state authority is bad, anyone ever telling me anything and me ever listening to anyone besides myself is bad. That's where people, I think, they cross this line of their ego takes over and they sort of think well, I only trust me and I can't work with anybody else, and that's how the liberty community can accidentally get pigeonholed as being the people that don't want to play nice with others. Mm-hmm. And a lot of us really aren't that way. We actually do play well with others. We're just you're very about what you want. But I just like that you and Andrew were both humble enough to go, I got my stuff, you got your stuff, but we both see the main goal. We want this movie to be good, and so we're going to do it.
It's so important to know ahead of time what the actual arrangement is of who's doing what, who gets the final say and stuff. I've been a musician forever, and I've been in bands with a guy that you won't have heard of, but I still think he's the best songwriter I've ever met. Grew up in the same town as me, and we had an order to do things. He would write the song and the guitar part, and then I would add keyboards to it. And it's Turner Adams. He just grew up in this little town where I grew up in, and he's awesomely creative. And he would do his thing. He makes the song, and I add my part to it. And if he wants to say, "Can you not do that? I sort of don't like that," then it does that. So he's sort of in charge, but also he knew he's not in charge of keyboards. Here, Larken, do your thing with this. And if there's something he wants to suggest or complain about, then he could. But just knowing ahead of time that's the arrangement. I've also written my own music all over the place, which is a completely different process, because it's nobody's telling me anything. I can start from scratch and do anything I want. And then he will give me a song. It has the lyrics, it has the melody, it has the guitar, and I will add something and add orchestration around it. And it's a completely different job. And they're both really fun, and they're both really, enjoyable, but only because we're well aware of the arrangement here. And it was the same thing with Andrew. It was I know you're the director, and sometimes you'll decide things, and I'll go, and you're still the director, so it doesn't matter. I'll go whine in the corner and write a novel while you finish making a movie. First, I'll do the next day's rewrites that you just told me to do.
But it's a level of maturity to be so you're going to say things, and then I'm going to be mad about it, and don't be mad at me permanently because I'm mad about it. Please don't take it personally. I'm going to go be mad about it and get over it over in my corner. And it's kind of mature to be able to say that to Andrew and have him go, okay.
Yeah, the thing is, Andrew is not some temperamental diva director.
No.
I can yell at him, and 2 seconds later, he's just working on it.
It's back to normal, yeah.
He's a cool guy, and he's very down to earth,
Cool
so
dude.
It's not... he's not all fragile, and we have to be dealt. I'll say what I think, and I'll say what he thinks, and that's stupid. Why are we doing that? That's idiot. And the end result, I thought, was just what he came up with was just awesome, and it was so weird, because I'm used to, if I do a piece of music myself for a book, I control the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, not only was I not in control of all this, none of us were in control of all this. Like, nobody was in control. I was like, well, that didn't go right, and this went wrong, and that just screwed up, and this thing isn't working. And so every day we're changing the scenes and changing the script and changing things all over the place. And then at the end, we're both like falling over from sleep deprivation. And Andrew had it bad, and he just basically tortured himself because, like, this has to get done. We have this tiny little time window. We don't have the money to do anything past that. And so at the end of shooting, he's like, maybe we have a movie.
Yeah, he's
then
like got all the shots he thinks he's like, it's such a blur, it was such chaos. I
hope
we
I have
a
everything I
movie.
need.
But
and then,
you know,
and then he hid in his apartment for 8 months and edited the whole thing. And then when we went over to watch the first rough cut, it was pretty close to the final cut, so I shouldn't call it a rough cut. I was like, I don't know what this is going to look like. I haven't even had to think about it, and I haven't seen any of it because I not even like dailies and stuff.
And you just saw the
And we watched
disjointed,
it,
chaotic mess of shooting.
And what he had put together, I was like, how the hell did you do that?
Yeah,
How
I
did
thought
we
the
even
same
have
thing.
half of that footage?
I was like, what? Like, when you told me the story's going down, and then I was there, and I saw some of it, and then I saw we put together. I remember, like, we sat there, and, like, the credits rolled, and I just looked at Andrew, and I'm like, dude. I was like, you are an editing god. I was like, and I had just a guess of what you had to work with, and I didn't even see the whole thing. And just the guess I had, I know that was some work.
Yeah.
Like,
and there were bits and pieces that I wasn't there for the shooting, like the flashback and the campaign commercials. So there were parts that I wasn't even aware of at all at the time, and it wasn't just, oh good, you did it. It was like, how did you do it that well with what we had?
It's the most comic
miracle.
relief you get in the movie, and it's necessary. I think it
Yeah.
really. I think it gives it takes it from that dark. It takes it a little bit out of horror and into like culty Quentin Tarantino genre film
Making
vibe, and
fun
make
of
it
the
more of like a
insanity.
bizarre cult classic film instead of it's just horror. So it rides the line of dark horror comedy.
Yeah, and that was one of the main things that early on Andrew said. You know, there's a number of things in here that are going to be funny. And I was like,
I would have to agree.
what?
Yeah.
And now I totally see it, but at the time I was just sort of picturing it as this drama piece. This
Hair
pretty
sniffing.
freaking serious.
Hair sniffing.
Hair sniff.
You know,
Among
it's
a
funny
bunch of
because
other things.
We saw that. I was joking in the back. I was going Biden bot because
Yeah.
it was the hair sniffing and things like that. So one thing I actually, talking about your whole story of how it almost was like a surrender to you. Like you had to have that faith and you had to surrender that control. And that's something, we're big about here on BG Cast is kind of the spiritual aspect of things too. And I noticed you guys played homage to that in a particular scene when we had Mr. Smith doing his occult ritual. And I think really that brought to light, even if it was just that scene itself, that a lot of these people, these predator class, they're into some very, very interesting things.
Yeah.
And into very interesting beliefs. And do you feel that this kind of has a larger part to play when it comes to the grand scope of things, their mentality behind these philosophies?
I think the weird thing is I think it actually handicaps the psychos getting into some of this. I think some of their beliefs actually make them worse at it, which is weird. And that may be like a completely different topic. But Andrew and I went back and forth about like how much of that to focus on, because I didn't want that to seem like the main focus. It turns out he's into this really creepy stuff. But I was perfectly okay with dropping the mention of it in there, because I want people to consider, like, these politicians that we kind of know they're corrupt, like, might they be something way worse than just kind of corrupt?
Right.
And yeah, there's something
And
way
they
worse.
are.
But I didn't want to focus on that too much, but I like the inclusion of that in there to make people go, ooh, okay, just how screwed up is this guy? But I guess the shortest version I can think of for the answer is, I think sometimes their own belief system makes them do things a little bit stupidly. It makes them believe in things that turn out to not work for them, but at the same time, it's still like it serves them enough that I think a bunch of them have done that. And it's not a secret that Hitler's into the dark soul. There's Skull and Bones. That's not a secret. Bohemian Grove's not a secret. Like, there's a bunch of weird stuff. Now, just how weird and creepy it gets, people can debate back and forth. But yeah, I was glad to put in a hint towards that.
I want to say that I actually think there's a distinction between people who are consciously into some very interesting, like I would just say dark versions of dark magic, dark spiritual stuff. And they might know what they're into, and they're what I would call the true believers, where they're like they think this is a legit thing and it's giving them this power. So to the extent that they believe in it, maybe it does do a thing for them. But I think there's a degree to which there's a whole other rung of that class of people that just, they don't even buy into it. It's a little kid's game, and they see it as a really excellent way to suck in a bunch of people that they know will become true believers and fall for it, and actually get sucked into this cool black magic thing that they think is sexy, dark, fun, so that they can go, this is how I have something on all of you. Because that's what the ruling class does, is they try to get a lot of those people in power that are actual creeps, they make sure they're one of many people they've got dirt on. And they create clubs of people doing dirt shit so they can go, you are on the list. And then if all that person did was some kind of weird stuff with this group of people, then they didn't cross over into anything evil, but maybe they were on the same island as a certain guy. Okay, well now your name is on the flight logs. So even if you never did anything, you never even knew it was going down on the island. You were just a famous guy that was like, hey, want to come to a sexy pool party on an island? Okay, well now you and a bunch of other names are on logs if that's ever exposed. And the real guys that are doing the real crap that maybe you never even knew what they were really into or up to are like, yeah, by the way, if we go down, you're all going down with us. Yeah. So you can't talk any crap or expose us because you were at the party.
That specific thing was in a subplot that had to get cut. It's still in the book, where Mr. Smith has dirt on Jones. It's like, I control you now too, because I know what you did, and I covered up for you. But
your wife.
Yeah, whenever I want, I
or
can
something
use it
like
against
that.
Well, I had a discussion, with Ed, and we were kind of like, well, the scene with the hair sniffing thing, it's like, well, it could have gone two ways. Either she was his daughter, because a lot of men slept with the female slaves, so it could have been his daughter, or he could have been just a creep and doing creepy things, so to me, I think you kind of it leaves it a little bit open to those darker things, but then it also it like brings a light. Well, what's really going on there, and really questioning it.
Seem benign, but maybe not really be.
And I think the film did this. I like having the whole spectrum of, there are some points that you're just punched in the face with and nobody can possibly miss. There's a bunch of stuff that you may or may not notice, and then there's a bunch of stuff that people can sort of theorize about. And I almost don't want to spoil that by saying the actual intention. Like, what was this person thinking? Did this mean something?
Like, let people theorize.
Yeah,
and have their
and I like to leave that open. And so I've had some people guess at things that weren't intentional. Like, did this mean that? Like came up today.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, no, not intentionally, but I actually like the fact that people came up with that. There are some things that are pretty indirect that were intentional. There's one thing, I don't want to do a spoiler. I'll say what the riddle is, but I've only had one person come up to me and ask me if they were right in guessing the reason the retarded boy's name was TT. And they were, and they got it right.
Yes.
And that was intentional, but I won't say what it is.
Okay.
So now everybody can theorize.
I think it's really interesting too. You guys even brought up a homage and a nod to the fractional reserve banking system.
Yeah.
And that's something that we both were talking, all three of us were talking about on the way here, was that the learning about the financial system has been a very big thing that has caused a lot of us to embark on this awakening and embark on this path. I mean, was that a really big thing for you in your path here in your journey? And if so, did you implement it almost in that way during that scene? They came up with the Jones Plantation reserve credit notes.
Yeah, in the original script, we were both like, yeah, we definitely have to do a mention of this. That isn't in the original animated one because it didn't get in depth that much. It wasn't actually in my journey to becoming a voluntarist but I already knew about it by then. I was like, well, this is heinously evil, and they force it on people. They don't even, it's not just, here's this crappy currency you can use or not. It's like, you're going to use this, or we send men with guns to, like, if you try to compete with us, very bad things happen to you. But I definitely wanted that to be in the movie because that's one of the most fundamental means of controls of the psychos. Yeah. And it's fun because in this setting, like, understanding or even, like, daring to admit how our currency system works is not fun for most people to realize, yeah, it's a giant scam. It steals, like, if you just look at the value of the dollar, just by monetary policy is the nice word for it, they've stolen like 90% of the buying power of everybody holding dollars over the last 100 years or whatever it is, like just by this direct scam. But if you say that to people, it's uncomfortable and it's easy for them to go, that can't be true. I would have heard that. It's like they don't even hide it. They just don't. But I wanted the movie to give away that everybody could see. Oh, I could see why they would do it and how that would work and how it would trick them. And then next time they look at the dollar bill, go, oh crap! It's a Jones Plantation credit.
Oh damn! I fell for that.
Yeah, right. And I think the degree to which you're going to find the system, finding out how it actually worked, being traumatic to find out, is the degree to which you understood in a certain way or thought you did understand it before. So like if you were sort of like me, where you're like, something is amiss here, and I've always sensed that, but I'm told that this is how it's supposed to be. I don't get it, and I'm just sort of swimming in a sea of confusion going, I feel like there's something to this financial system that's a little bit funky. And I'm not sure why, but I need to look into this. And then there's people who, for whatever reason, they somehow were able to be, and I think for whatever reason, but we all know, through brainwashing and just the system being, portraying it the way they are, their brain's able to compartmentalize the biggest problem that is like the whole linchpin of the financial system that makes it upside down and wrong, and they never learn about that because they never do. What they actually learn, though, on top of that instead, is in place of it, they get sold on like the dream system. It's the best thing anyone could ever have. And if you have this brain that tends to sort of look for the positive, but at the expense of looking at reality and what's real, including the negative, and then you're sold something that's shiny and looks pretty because it's sold to you in a pretty way, and then you do things within that system in a way that, at least for all intents and purposes, so far it seems like you're playing their fun game exactly right, and this game works to your favor, and you're like, I'm prosperous and I make money, and then all of a sudden it seems like it's getting harder to make money, and then now it seems like you're making so much money, the government wants way too much of it all of a sudden, and now you're like, something's wrong, and then you start to find out that this whole thing you were sold on is the best game ever played, and every country wishes they had our game, is actually a giant rigged thing. You're going to be a lot more pissed, and you're going to be a lot more emotional about it if you spent, like, say, I don't know, millions of dollars investing into the wrong things in that system because you were playing a game a certain way based on how you thought it was run. And now you're like, I would never have invested my millions of dollars this way. I would never have put my money here. I wouldn't have bought those things because I would have known that, given this rigged game, is not how to do things in this game. And if you've always known the game is rigged, you're actually like, this isn't that bad. I figured out the rigged game. Now I'm outsmarting it. Whatever. If you're the guy just waking up, you're like, ah!
Yeah, and for the people who already don't have an incentive to look into it because they're like doing pretty well playing the game as is.
Right.
To go here, read Creature from Jekyll Island, all 80,000 pages of it or something, which is an awesome book. But most people are going to go, what? But if you start with here, watch Jones Plantation, and for like 3 minutes, they explain how, if you just make up a thing and you trick them into thinking it has value, like anybody can understand that version of the trick. And if they then go out and go, wait, is there just a more complex version of the same thing going on? Then, like, so a lot of the movie is sort of, here's tiny tidbits of how the game works, but at a simple enough level that anybody watching goes, okay. And because it's, this is tricks being played on uneducated slaves, it's like you can get away with pretty much and they're not going to notice. So you do the simplified version of a whole lot of the tricks, the fear-mongering, the divide and conquer, the false flag, the currency thing, and anybody watching can go, oh yeah, I could see how that would work on them and then hopefully they go out into the real world and go, oh crap, it worked on me too. It had to be a little bit more sophisticated for the stuff they did on me, but it worked on me too.
So how do you feel about, like, there are people through several generations that they try and put systems into place to help people doing, surviving a little bit better. I mean, we did it through the Dust Bowl, we helped people out through the Depression. But you, like, how can I put it? It's really hard to, like, get everybody to follow, a structure when within 5 years, the people that, put the laws into place or the systems are now helping to tear those down or take money from those systems that are supposed to help the average person, be better and prosper as an equal. Because, I mean, in a sense, that's what they sell us, is equality for, with our freedom. They offer us comfort versus change, which, we all know that everything changes. Yeah. But even when we do try and change things for the good, we still have, different presidents throughout years. And I've noticed, because, I've been around for a little bit, and I've watched, all these bills, go into place, and then them try and take it, away, and, some of it is like, the woman's right to say what she has, going on with her own body. I don't think it's just one person that needs to have say over what's going on with their own body. Everybody needs that own self, awareness and care of themselves to be able to, take care of themselves. But, for those people that aren't as fortunate, and we do try and work as a community, to help them. I mean, how does that make you feel when those programs are being taken away? And that's why we got so many people that are homeless.
Well, there's a fundamental problem that it's going to be a rude awakening to a whole lot of people, that as long as they look to politics to solutions, even the things that look like solutions are never solutions. And humanity has almost no practice at being responsible adults. They have practice at whining to Big Daddy or Big Mommy government to please do something about this. And sometimes they'll get freebies for a while, and they think, oh good, they saved us by giving us counterfeit currency that we can buy stuff with. Oh look, the dollar just collapsed. Oh look, you just bought the loyalty of however many million people by giving them free stuff. And that's the socialist game. There are so many things that they're always, it's like in the movie where they say, if Smith is so horrible, why is he doing all these things to help us? Mm-hmm. He isn't ever doing it. Nobody in government is ever doing anything to help us. Even when the people petition for, can you have this act or this law or this program to do something to help these people, never does government do it out of good intentions, and never will it result in helping the people in the long run. Because you cannot help humanity by violently dominating it, and all government can do is violently dominate people. Now, they'll violently dominate people and rob this group quietly and very loudly give the money to somebody else. Yes. That is not helping humanity. Even if those people go, rah, 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 we got some help. Cool, you helped us out. Yeah, you gave them stolen loot, bought their loyalty, pissed off these people, created a divide, and the politicians will use that divide to make you hate each other while they rob both of you till the end of time. Yeah. And what has to happen is the belief in authority has to collapse completely, and then human beings can start acting like responsible grown-ups that figure out voluntary ways to help people.
Yeah, and when no one's there to look after them, there is no government, there is no daddy, no mommy, and they're an adult and they realize I need to figure out how to grow things, I need to figure out how to feed myself, I need to figure out how to build shelter. They're going to have to do it on their own, and that's the uncomfortable part. If government nannies generations of people and then falls apart, the generations left still are grown kids. They don't know how to feed themselves, they don't know how to clothe themselves, they don't know how economy works, and they have to figure it all out all over again. And that sucks, but they have to. That's the only way.
It doesn't mean the individual has to do it on their own. It means we help each other.
We help each
other. And we cooperate with each other. But we don't whine to Mr. Smith. Hey,
Yes.
Mr. Smith, can you give us this and that? And oh, look how
It's
helpful
what you
he
say.
is.
It's up to the individual to own their conscience and go,
Right.
what
And
can
then-
I do outside of government and with myself and other people I know to come to get to my goals and to get to the solutions that I need to get to.
Yeah, and that requires humanity to grow up, and people cannot grow up if they believe in authority. If you think somebody has the right to rule you, you're not a grown-up yet.
And if you're looking for somebody to save you, you haven't grown up yet.
Yeah.
Well, and if you think that, government should be, running the people, then you're wrong, because, our Constitution is made to we the people. We're supposed to run our government. And, this is why I'm like, some of these programs that once upon a time they were put into place, like I said, over the years there has been presidents that have signed off on, oh, we don't need this program, we don't need this, and it showed up a lot when COVID happened, because before, during Truman time, I mean, they really had stuff to where it went down a line as far as a chain of command. You let one person know, the other person lets the other know, and so forth and so on. And it's supposed to get to people within, hours. Just to happen like that. But because there was a lot of programs that were taken out, especially medical and being able to help out people, it made things be chaotic, and it didn't run as it's supposed to.
A lot of people might not want to hear this. You might be one of the ones that don't want to hear it. The Constitution is 100% anti-freedom.
All of it.
Every last bit of it. It was Mr. Smith at his finest
When he wrote
creating a ruling class that tricked people into thinking we give a shit about you and we're serving you. And Mr. Jones up there, I'm now your servant. That was never true of any government ever. And the Constitution worked so well that it was copied by the three most violent regimes in the history of the world: the Soviet Union, Red China, and the Weimar Republic. They all copied the U.S. Constitution.
Because they're like, that's brilliant.
They were smart enough to leave out the Second Amendment, because that's caused them some trouble. Otherwise, it is the most brilliant way to say, we're there to serve you. You're actually in charge. We'll do these programs and these laws to protect you. And that is the means to tyranny that has worked. And this is the thing. I didn't even know this until a number of years ago when I actually read the constitutions of all those other regimes. Democratically elected constitutional republics with a Bill of Rights have been the three most oppressive, murderous regimes in the history of the world. They were all the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics the Constitution allows their people to vote. As a republic, they have a Bill of Rights. Didn't do any good. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea, North Korea, is a democratically elected constitutional republic with a Bill of Rights. Does it do any good? Nope. Weimar Republic, which became Nazi Germany, same thing. Red China, the Constitution of Communist China, the People's Republic of China. There was a constitution. They let people vote, had a Bill of Rights, didn't do any good because they recognized, wow, that thing that said we're going to be the tiniest, most limited government to serve the people became the biggest authoritarian empire the world has ever known. And when people go, we just have to try that again.
No,
you don't.
There isn't such thing as a group of people that's there just to protect you. As soon as they say that, and they're not people you know, and you handed over your arms to them, they are automatically going to become a group of corrupt people.
And that was the plan from the beginning. And it's why most of the people who were rah about the revolution were about the Constitution. Patrick Henry, Thomas Jefferson, even though he was in France at the time, Thomas Paine were all like, it was Patrick Henry who said, I smell a rat. And wouldn't go to the Constitutional Convention because he's like, and he warned all over the place, this will be worse than a king very quickly because of how you set this up. But it worked so well that the oppression under the new constitutional republic was literally way worse than it had been under a king within just a few decades.
And there's something really important to point out here that maybe some people don't realize. From the very, very, very beginning, everything done to the non-white cultures on this continent to help them was consciously, intentionally done knowing that's exactly how you destroy a culture. You take away their understanding of nature that's instinctive, because you take away their power by literally capturing all of them by force, and then you hand them fake money so they don't understand how value works. They think it's something that's handed to them. They think free money is just money, something that's given to me and then I spend it. No, you create value by doing things. That's why the tribes were fine left alone. You give them a thing, you trap them, and you go, you have no freedom except for this stuff that we give you, and you're allowed to spend it how we say. And that's how you completely destroy the history of a really cool culture that was just fine if you'd let them live there. But what they did was they stole it from them, and they said, we're going to give them the reservations. And it was the evilest thing they did, and they knew exactly what they were doing. And then they created the programs to give them free money, knowing we're going to make addicts, drug addicts, alcoholics, and commons who know nothing about economy, and it will destroy all of their culture.
And the land that we gave you, guess what? Because you became alcoholics, you couldn't take care of your kids, we take away your kids, and we take away the land that we gave you to live on. And this has gone on in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
You know, the tribes up there.
And
And it still happens all over.
And
all
it's
over.
the same thing they did with American blacks. And both Thomas Sowell and Walter Williams, who are both black economics professors, have done a great job of like spelling out the whole way that to destroy literally slavery, like the most evil institution you can imagine. Slavery did less harm to a whole bunch of aspects of the black community than the welfare state did. There were more slave children that had both of their parents there than there are black children in America today. And the thing, like the movie, like Smith says, you have to be willing to do the unthinkable. That wasn't an accident. That was by design. And that's something that most people don't want to think about. Oh, well, the welfare was to help them and stuff. And you look at how well black Americans were doing, like right after forced segregation, which is like horrible too. It's not as bad as slavery, but it's pretty damn horrible. Right after that, their prosperity, their education levels, their success levels were just skyrocketing until government showed up to help. And then it all plummets. The literacy rate goes way down. The illegitimacy rate goes way up. The dependency goes way up because that's what they're trying for. And if people read into that good intentions and are like, how could that possibly have gone wrong? They'll never understand it. But if you start with, were you trying to enslave them again? Then it all adds up.
Then it all makes perfect sense.
And
suddenly.
that's what the slavesmiths of the world do. And it's that evil, but it's that easy for people to fall for it because it's like, why does he help us so much? Why is he literally giving us free money? Like, how can he be? And
the government gives me a big paycheck to help me every month with my disability.
They don't
care about the children.
Realize the destruction, and the slavesmiths absolutely realized the destruction. Like, and this is the thing I've said on occasion, people go, what? You get far more power over people by giving them stuff than by taking it away. So they rob the hell out of everybody, they tax the hell out of everybody, and then they give away very loudly, we're going to give you this school and this bridge and these benefits and these people that we just treated like crap for the past 100 years, we're going to give you all this free money to make up for that. So now you're dependent to us and you're going to keep voting for us. Like, we never gave a crap about you. We didn't back then, we don't now. I mean, the one of the most ridiculous examples was Senator Byrd. He's dead now. But he's this big Democrat. Oh, we're going to help the poor. And he's like high up in the KKK before that. You think he suddenly got nice? Like, what the hell? He just found a better way to enslave you and rob you and
He's a kind guy now.
Feeding people an illusion of something great and grand that's really not. It's more soulfully gripping, taking away, the very essence that's us, and putting it in a little ball and throwing it in the trash, and leaving us to die and not even have our souls fulfilled because we threw it away for an illusion of what we thought we wanted.
Because we sold ourselves. And that's what I want people to get from the Jones Plantation is most of you sold yourselves and you didn't know. You need to do something that isn't that from now on.
So